Eminent Chancellor, Madam President, representative on the Board of Governors, members of Senate, guests, graduates, friends, and families. My most heartfelt congratulations go to all of you who are graduating today. No matter what happens in the future, this will always be one of the very big days in your life, and you should be very proud. Getting a university degree involves years of effort and frequently hardship, not only yours, but your parents and other family members. Sacrifices have likely been made, and I urge you to remember that. And no matter what it is you strive for, there isn't much more valuable in the world than decency and a strong sense of the humanity of others. I am myself thrilled and grateful to be the recipient of an honorary degree from this esteemed university. And although I'm more than a bit nervous, I'm honored to be speaking to you today. In my life as a writer, I am surrounded by immensely gifted, hardworking, and worthy people, and as a little old lady, nobody knows better than I do the strange twists and turns of individual life, and how in that laundry dryer of happenings we call life, nobody knows who will actually tumble to the top. And so I try hard to remember that although I did make choices, and some of them helped to bring me here today, there is a part of me that is as surprised as anyone, as an equal number of them might have ended in total failure, if not life in prison, and that despite the foregoing, doesn't really understand how on earth I got here. I have been asked to tell you a little about my life and the events that might have brought me here today, and to impart also any wisdom I might have that might be of help to you on your journey through life. I'm 72 years old now, and I guess if I had any brains at all, I ought to have something wise to say to you. What I mostly have to say, though, is that life is amazing, that its twists and turns can hardly be foreseen or even predicted or even expected, and that the result is that the best laid schemes, as Robbie Burns wrote, gang aft agley, meaning that humans make plans and the gods laugh. That being the case, then, it seems clear to me that the best thing one can do to prepare oneself for life is to work toward achieving a calm attitude of mind toward our whole condition as humans, which is, in general terms, one of uncertainty, so that every blow or surprise doesn't knock us on our backsides and leave us for a period unable to function or striking out wildly in ways which can only hurt ourselves and others. It takes wisdom, understanding, and patience to achieve that. I think that when you're the daughter, granddaughter, and great-granddaughter of pioneers, you absorb with your mother's milk the uncertainty of life. I was born into a log house in the bush north of Garrick, Saskatchewan, just on the edge of the boreal forest. We were among that first crowd of settlers the government let in there in the 30s. My father had a sawmill, and living was strictly hand to mouth. And I must say that I wonder even today what my father was thinking of, what he saw in his mind's eye as the future. A chance to make a reasonable living for his family, I suppose, but you can imagine that that is not what happened in that swampy, fly and mosquito-ridden land. In 4 years, we were gone, starting again, once again, with nothing. That 4 of the 5 of us, all girls, went to university is in the nature of a miracle. The 5th was unable to go to school. Like all of you, we were smart kids. And because we were girls, hardly great beauties, not blessed with the marriageable requirements of the day, we knew that whatever we wanted, we would have to get for ourselves. We became ambitious. I remember when I was about 10 years old, sitting with a friend on her front steps declaring, "When I grow up, I will not be poor. I will not live in a small town. I will live among people who can pronounce my name." My name was the horrendously difficult Leblanc. But if you weren't a Protestant Anglo in those days in small-town Saskatchewan, you may know something about this. Your name was consistently mangled, no matter how simple it was. I often think that that ambition to be recognized for myself was stuffed into me before I was even born. But my sisters and I were also raised in naivete, where being ambitious translated to doing your best in school, reading every book on the planet, following all the rules, being obedient, and thus clearly worthy, and from this, as naturally as the sun after rain, worldly success would come. It's hard to believe, I think, not that you shouldn't be doing these things, but that you shouldn't think doing them is all it will take to be successful. And for ambitious people, it was curiously passive, its only goal in practical terms seeming to be to join the middle class. Nothing wrong with that, but hardly unique, nor something that in itself would bring one to this moment today. When I was 9, I thought I would write books, or at least a book, but that then didn't work out for me, so I began to draw and paint, and over my school-going years to imagine myself as a visual artist, which I truly thought was the most glorious thing anyone could possibly be, that there could be no other profession that could ever come anywhere near to holding the joy inherent in being an artist. So you can see that I was already on a conflicting path. On the one hand, determined to achieve the middle class by conventional means, and on the other, knowing that what I really wanted was to be an artist. And of course, the first one out, as it tends to do for children raised in a world where there is never enough of anything in the way of material goods, and the rest of the world views you, because of this, as inferior to them. You have to prove yourself, and few artists are viewed by the rest of society as having proved themselves, because in those same worldly terms, most artists are failures. As the years of my adulthood began to pass and my dream of being a painter having failed, or more accurately, I having failed it, life getting in the way, at 38 years of age, life helped me to find my way back to writing. This time, I knew it when I found it for what it was, the very thing I was meant to do, the thing that I must spend the rest of my life pursuing, whether I was successful or not, and no matter what it cost me. I didn't find that out overnight, but as I kept at it, instead of flagging, my desire to be a writer grew stronger and stronger, as did my determination. To be a better writer required knowing more and more, by reading in order to be more cultured and more knowledgeable about the world's wisdom, and in writing itself to be more stylistically sound, to learn to write beautiful prose, and especially to find ways to say the things I wanted to say so that they were at once more telling and more profound. For years, all I cared about was writing. I told a television interviewer once when he asked me, I gave up everything for writing. And I meant it. For years, everything I did or thought was about writing. My whole life was about writing. I did not want it any other way, although I constantly mourned the normal life I was missing. And because I lived so far from a city, I was lonely, and I had no other artists for companions. Year after year, for more than 30 of them, I lived in isolation, not fitting into the community, and my daily life, although I was married, was mostly solitary. Another way to put it would be to say that the hardest lesson a writer can learn is about the outsider status most writers occupy. The very nature of the work does that to you. It puts you on the outside, always watching. I sometimes think there is something in the artist that yearns for that status, something that does not want to belong, to be one of a bunch, even though there is also a part that yearns deeply to be like everyone else and a part of the real world. In 1974, I was in my tenure year as a lecturer at the University of Saskatchewan, and I was casting about frantically to get out of there before tenure trapped me forever in a world I found bore little resemblance to the one I had thought I would find when becoming a scholar had been so attractive to me, as sufficiently elevated from the log cabin in the northern bush, and finally the right place for me. But I remember saying to my friends, and I ask you all to forgive me for this, The university is killing all that is the best in me, by which I meant that with the creative urge with which I was either cursed or blessed, I did not belong in that tightly scheduled, competitive, and highly demanding world. Just quit might have been the best advice, but I had a child to feed and a mortgage to pay, and having dragged myself up into the near middle class, I had no intention of falling backwards. It was at that point that I met my cattle rancher husband and gave up my job, house, friends, and family to go off into another universe to make the rest of my life. It occurs to me, and I think it is true, that if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be a writer. And as I didn't even then know that I would be a writer, we can hardly call it good planning. There were moments when I felt I had made a bad choice, but they always passed. And I can truthfully say that if I hadn't gone into that strange, largely unknown life in the middle of the great western grasslands, where I was alone for most of the day for many, many years, the artist in me would never have had the chance to emerge. And yet, as I've said, I always knew that was where my happiness lay. For all but the lucky few, that will be the conflict too, whether to focus entirely on worldly success and ignore the inner drive, or to do the opposite with all its deprivations and struggle and its apparent failure. Or you might be lucky, as one of my family members is, who, as they say, fooled around for 4 or 5 years out of high school, finally went to university to study law, not that it particularly interested him, and by sheer accident of availability took a class in geology, whereupon he discovered he loved rocks, he loved that study of the earth, and that was the end of law. Today, he is a practicing geologist, both deeply interested in his work and earning a good living. Finding and following that inner drive is a strange thing, a difficult thing, a puzzling thing. I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that to try not to let making a living or being a success overwhelm you and possess you entirely, but leave room for that creative urge that lives inside all of us and will express itself in myriad ways if we allow it. To stifle it completely is to stifle the soul. That is my best advice to this year's graduates. Thank you.